Hey, Taco here. I just thought I would take you through some old pictures of my airplane that I built. I've been following Xyla Foxlin on YouTube as she builds a peat and pole wood airplane, and it really reminded me of the time I built a Team Max-103 wooden airplane. A lot of the same kind of thing. So that's actually what got me into ultralights and got me wanting to fly my paramotor now. This was the first piece I bought. It was the vertical stabilizer in front of the rudder. I got the kit, and it was like a big model airplane. You lay it out on a life-size set of plans and glued it together. The next stage, of course, was the rudder and the tail section, the what they call the empennage, or the horizontal stabilizer, and the elevator. I had to make all those fittings myself. So it came in steel tubes, and I had to cut them and all that. There's the elevator. That was a real fun build. I enjoyed doing the elevator. Then I just kind of store them out of the way against the walls. This was an unfinished spare bedroom in my mother's house, so I was using that. There's some of the hardware I had to make. I had to make the blue section, another hinge on the rudder, and then came the wings. So first thing I did was the wing ribs, and they give you a nice jig, a 1-to-1 printed jig board piece, and then that's what it looks like after you actually make the jig. And then you cut the ribs to the right, cut the rib wood to the right pieces and glue them all up, and there they are. I used T88 epoxy, which was kind of a standard thing at the time. You can see various ribs in various stages of development. There you go. And notice they don't have the curved fronts on them. We'll get to that here in a second. So after the ribs are all done, you make the spars, and then you slide them on and glue them up. And they start with a flat front, but then you have to cut these kind of horseshoe-shaped things to go on the front, so that actually forms the front of the wing, or the leading edge of the wing. There they are. And then there's a stringer that goes down the middle to keep them all in one place and to be fabricated later. You see a finished wing on the wall back there with some of my patterns. Having an unfinished spare room was really nice because I could just stick stuff to the walls and I wasn't worried about hurting anything. Really good view down the wing. And notice the little half moon cutouts. The ailerons were built into the ribs, and then what you'd have to do is go back and cut them all out. So you knew the aileron, and you see thousands of staples as I put the front end of the aileron on that curved plywood. Used a lot of rubber bands. And then there's one end, so it shows you the fitting. I think I actually bought that fitting because it was steel and coated with something. But everything else I had to make. There's a good view of the aileron before I put the centerpiece on. There's me looking like a young Jeffrey Dahmer. Boy, I looked creepy back then. And then here's the leading edge of the wing getting its plywood glued in place. That was tough. You had to spread a lot of glue in a very short time, and then get all those rubber bands on it and staple it together before the glue would start to harden. And then I actually clamped that underneath. That's an inspection port for the pitot tube later. So, and also for the attach points for the wing strut bracket. So yeah, I had to go back through and take out all those. Now we're up to the fuselage. So you build the fuselage in 2 sections. Then you turn them up and join them together to create this kind of box-looking thing. That's actually the side of the seat board right there. And then you see where I've drawn stuff inside and out, for fitment later. A lot of little gussets there. I'm going to have to glue on later. I didn't have many clamps. Those wood clamps were expensive, so I only had 4 of them, so I had to use them sparingly. And you could start to see some paint on the inside. The paint was not for beauty, it was to seal the wood. I had to make that fitting there, that aluminum thing. That's actually the push-pull cable for the elevator. It's behind the seat, looking forward. You can see the gas tank lid in there. So a lot of this stuff was just wood pieces, and then you'd put flatter pieces of plywood on the outside to kind of build it up. That's the floorboard there, and then that big half moon cutout was for the stick So aileron and elevator control. That's the back side of that. That's fitting up the, I think that's the engine mount plate. So you had to squeeze the front of the cockpit into the right shape for the engine mount. Now, I put a fuel sender in my tank, a fuel level sender in my tank, and I was going to have an actual fuel gauge in the cockpit because the tank sits up. Actually, it sits right over your knees. So really, you can't see how much fuel you have left. There, I'm test fitting the brackets on top. Those brackets will actually be screwed to plywood. I think that's the inside of the engine mount. There's the wheels. Yeah. That was fun because the axle was slightly too big and I had to sand it down and then test fitting them on the fuselage. I would go back later and remove it because I got to put the turtle decks on now. So the back behind the seat is a series of turtle decks, and there's fitting the first one up in front of the vertical stabilizer. You see all the cross bracing in there all put together. There's another view of, that's behind the seat. That picture should have been earlier in the thing. But there's all the turtle decks going in. And I kind of cheated. I glued the front and the back pieces on, and then later I came in and put the other pieces in the middle to hold the stringers on. You can see the opening for the fuel refilling cap. That's going to have actually pieces of wood in there forming a little separate section for the gasoline. There's my fuel sender, or fuel gauge, I think. You can see the canopy's in place without the windshield and the primer knobs on it. This is the flaps. I had to make that myself. And I'm doing all this with hand tools. I don't have any complicated tools. I'm using a bench grinder and hacksaws to make all these things. So, flap position handles, so it had several pieces. This is really neat. This is the stick, of course. So front and back is that push-pull cable. And then side to side will be the ailerons, and you can see how they cross over. Really kind of a neat little bit of kit. And then it's all sitting in some nylon washers. These are the foot pedals, but they've got springs. So these are like door or cabinet hinges with springs in them. Keeps the pedals from flopping over backwards if you take your foot off the pedals. So it holds tension. And I had Team Aircraft specially make me a red seatbelt. Normally they come black, and I asked for a red one. So there's the tail end with the struts in place. So it had tail struts. And then there's my primer and my fuel lines. Just sort of kind of a test fit. I would eventually go back and replace all these lines. Here's my fuel system. So you can see there's a fuel pump and a fuel switch. And I moved the valve. So I put the valve in a different place right after the fuel filter. So that I actually drew that up, and I'm not sure what I drew it up for. And then I'm not sure what that circuitry was in the box. It's some kind of relay thing, and I'm not sure. I had all the wires just kind of stuck on a couple of bolts for a bit, and then I went back and put in a real bus bar. There's the fuel valve in its new position with the electric fuel pump. And that's actually a drain, so water would collect in the lower tube if there was water in the fuel line, and you could actually drain the water out, just like they do in a Cessna or something. And I'm not sure, again, what some of this is anymore. These pictures are from 1999. These pictures predate consumer digital cameras for the most part, at least cheap consumer digital cameras. That's a hole in the fuselage. I actually didn't really drop the fuselage onto the landing gear and punched a hole in the side, so I had to patch that up. It was kind of a big mess. And then there's a tail wheel. And again, I was building this in an upstairs spare bedroom, so I had to move it to my new house when I got married and moved out. And so I actually had to lower the whole thing on a cable over the fence and then into the back of my truck. So again, these were actually, I had these on the internet somewhere and I copied them off, so they're really low resolution and crappy. But you can see, it was kind of funny. I had to drive this airplane 30 miles down the road. But no harm came to it. I got it in its new place, and now it's time for covering. I used the full polyfiber system on this, So there's the I sanded off the stuff on the rudder, of course, vertical stabilizer, and this is before I did a bunch of taping. So and then again, there's one of the fittings, two of the fittings that I had to make myself. So the process of polyfiber I thought was really kind of neat. And then I covered the landing gear. You didn't have to. I could have just left it painted. But really for, and there's the back of the panel after I kind of finished it up. I had a lot of the normal stuff: altitude, airspeed, compass, fuel temperature, or exhaust gas temperature, and cylinder head temperature. So that all the good stuff. Really more than an ultralight could need. There's some more polyfiber. God, I had glass jars of that stuff everywhere. You had to mix it up, and I forget how it works, but you had to mix all that stuff up. You used enough MEK to make the ATF nervous. Had that stuff everywhere. And this is actually a trim tab. I put a trim tab inside the elevator. They said it was our trim tab servo. And then there's the socket there. Again, these are really crappy pictures, of course. They said the elevator's large and heavy on the Mini Max, and so I did put a trim tab in there. There's my fuel door and my step before I covered the fuselage. Of course, look at all those runs. That's actually inside the cloth, all those runs. So you'd spray it, and the goop would go through and kind of run down the cloth on the inside. There's the elevator with the trim tab arm. So that little arm is for the trim tab. I even covered that. Now, not all of that is fabric. Some of it is just overspray on the wood, but I did color it that. And that, I forget the color. It's some kind of blue. You start off with pink and then silver and then blue. So I got the whole thing covered in that blue color. I was really wanting people to be able to see me. So as I'm flying along, if somebody's over me, I wanted to stand out from the ground. There's the wings in their custom rack that I built. And I used a lot of clothespins for different things. They said, hey, clothespins make great low-pressure wood clamps. So I used a lot of clothespins for different things. I think I had popped the trailing edge there loose, and I was gluing it back in. I know I went back and added a bunch more gussets in different places. There's the wing on its struts. I had to cut those struts and drill all those holes. So this is the wing getting set at the proper dihedral. So the wing isn't perfectly level. Each side goes up a little bit. So there was the wing, and there's the wing in its stands. And I had little cutout rings for inspection, and the aileron you can see down there getting ready to get painted. And there's my daughter. She used to love sitting in the plane and making plane noises. And I wound up selling it before I even put the engine on. I had everything I needed pretty much. So there she is. She's been eating something. I'm not sure what she's been eating. Looks like she's got a bloody nose or bloody chin. So that's it. Don't go splat.